In this video, we're going to discuss the object collider behavior. And to do so, I set up a basketball court for the demonstration. Let's see if I can make a basket. I'm just going to pick up this ball here using the carry object behavior to do that. And hopefully I can get this in one shot, but let's just try. All right, there we go. So it made the basket. You heard the sound it made when it collided with the rim. It made a different sound when it collided with the pavement. Of course, the ball doesn't bounce, but that's a separate issue. I applied the object collider behavior to this object, which is the basket, and then I applied it also to the pavement, right? But I did not apply it to the ball. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, why not? Wouldn't that be easier if the ball's colliding with the basket and it's colliding with the pavement? Wouldn't it make sense that you apply it to the ball and then it could just play the sounds? Depends on how many different objects you might collide with. So, for example, in my case, I've got two objects that I could potentially collide with, the basket and the pavement. But those two objects are going to make different sounds. Okay. The behavior only has two sound slots, but the two sound slots are terrain or object. So in other words, you can't distinguish between two different objects on the same ball, right? You couldn't say when the ball hits the basket, play one sound. When the ball hits the pavement, hit another sound. So we flip it on its head. We turn it around and we say, no. When something collides with the pavement, doesn't matter what it is, play this sound. When something collides with the basket, play this sound. Doesn't matter what collides with the basket. If I threw, another object of any kind, it's going to still play that same sound, which would kind of make sense, right? Let's suppose I threw my phone at the basketball hoops, probably going to make similar sound, right? So it kind of makes sense in this scenario. In your scenario, it might be a little bit different. So you're really going to have to think this one through. But with that being said, let's walk through the behavior and we can see kind of more about why I chose what I chose. Now, the layout for these parameters also are inconvenient for explanation, unfortunately, but I'm going to do my best here. We're going to start in the middle. Okay. Trigger detection. What is it that is going to trigger this sound to play? Is it when the object that I've applied this behavior to collides with terrain, or another object, or either one? That's really the options here. In my case, the basketball hoop is never going to collide with the terrain. So there's no point in choosing terrain or terrain plus object. So I just chose just object, any object, but just object. Okay. That means that the terrain distance doesn't matter, right? Because it's not going to collide with terrain. So we can ignore that. However, let's suppose that we were applying this to the basketball, right? Then what I would do is select object or terrain. And in that case, let's again pretend we're on the basketball for a moment. We select terrain and object. Then we have sound slot 1, which plays the sound when that object, in this case the basketball, collides with the terrain. And sound 1, which applies to when that object collides with any other object. But again, depending on the object you're talking about, that could be an entirely different sound. We have the terrain distance, which only applies in scenarios where the object you're applying this to collides with terrain, right? In our case, we're not doing that. We have the force detection. How hard does the object need to collide with this object in order to make that sound? Maybe it needs to be very forceful, right? Like slamming a door, boom, big sound, right? Or it's a light sound or any detection at all. Maybe I set it to 0 and it's really just the slightest force at all detected would play the sound. In this case, that made the most sense because I didn't know just how hard the ball was going to collide with the basket. So I set it down to 0. You really only have 0 to 0.10. That's your whole range. So you're going to have to dial this in depending on, again, the scenario that you're going for. What is it that you're attempting to collide with, and just dial that in until it makes sense and it's reliable. That's the other thing, right? If I put it on 10 and I threw the ball really hard and managed to collide with the basket, it would probably still make the sound, but I'd have to do that every single time. This is a lot more reliable, right? It's going to do that pretty much every time. So went with that lower value. The collision trigger checkbox has to do with triggering some other event. So let's suppose when I triggered or when I collided with the basketball hoop, I wanted to trigger an audio file that of crowd cheering, right? Then I could do that. I could just logic link that to maybe an audio zone that has that sound to it. And then I could check this box and trigger something when it detects collision. This case didn't really need to be there, so I left it unchecked. We already talked about the trigger detection options, so I won't cover that. And then lastly, like I said, you have the sound slots. So you have sound 0, which applies to the sound it's going to make when it collides with terrain. In this case, the basketball hoop is never going to collide with the terrain, so I don't really need a sound for that. And then this is the sound when it collides with any other object, and that's the rim sound that you hear. So if we look at the pavement, set up very similarly. I've got the force detection a little bit higher, not that much, and I've got a different sound on the pavement. Anything colliding with that pavement is going to make a similar sound. But in my case, I'm controlling the environment. There's only one object that's going to collide with those other objects, and that's the ball. Now let's just for a moment think about applying it to the basketball and why I didn't choose to do that. And hopefully by explaining this part of it, you'll understand why I made the decisions I did, and that'll help inform you on how you might apply this in your own scene. So why didn't I apply it to the ball? Well, the ball is going to collide with 3 potential objects, right? It's going to either collide with the pavement, it's going to collide with the basketball hoop, or it's going to collide with the terrain, right? Those are the 3 potential possibilities here. But 2 of those things are objects, and I only have 1 sound slot for objects. So, and the sound that it's going to make hitting the basketball rim is entirely different than the pavement. So I can't do that. And that's why I flipped it on its head and did it the other way. So hopefully that makes sense. I know this was a difficult one to really explain well, and I apologize if anybody's lost at this point, but I really did do my best here. The take home is if you need a sound to play when 2 objects collide or an object collides with terrain, this is your go-to. This is what you want. But that's it. That's the object collider behavior explained as best I could. If you enjoyed the video or if you learned anything new, please be sure to click the like button down below. It helps me out a lot. If you're new here, if you just haven't subscribed yet, would love to have you stick around. And lastly, if you'd like a notification for whenever a new video is posted, just click the bell icon and that'll let you know when a new video is ready. Thanks for watching all the way through. I always appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hey, don't forget there's a written guide for every behavior, including ones I haven't yet covered on this channel. And if you want to learn some more, why don't you check out this video next.